Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs and another edition of A Cup of Joe. And as you can see, it's a festive edition today. Merry Christmas to everybody. I hope you're having a fantastic time getting to see friends and family because that's what it's all about at this time of the year. And don't worry, I'm not going to hold the cup all the way through the episode because I know that drives a lot of people mad. Or maybe I should just for a bit of fun. No, I won't. So I'll put that down. So I was just having a look at some of my statistics for the last 12 months because this is the time of year that you tend to reflect and look back on what you've achieved over 2023. And over the last 12 months, this channel has had over 52 million views, which I think is quite mind-bending. It's gained another 111,000 subscribers, and the watch time, the amount of time that you've spent watching these videos, is over 6.8 million hours. Wow. And I also had a look at the lifetime statistics, and the channel has now had over 96 million views, so it's moving in on that magical 100 million view figure. We've got over 336,000 subscribers, and the total watch time is up to around 14 million hours. Now, when I started this channel, I couldn't even have dreamed of getting to those levels. So once again, cheers for that. Thank you very much. I will take a sip, actually. And hopefully you've got your favourite brew and you can have a drink with me. Now in today's video, what I want to talk about are some elections that are going around at the moment. And the most prominent of all of the elections is what's happening in Russia. In March of next year, President Putin is putting himself up for another term of office. And if he's elected, he will get another 6 years in the job, which will actually make him the longest serving ruler in Russia since the 18th century. And of course, in order to have a democratic election, you need to have some candidates, some people who are going to give President Putin a run for his money. And it's just been announced that a female candidate, Yekaterina Duntsova, who's outspoken against the war in Ukraine and has stated that if she's elected, she will stop the war, has now been barred from running for office. The Central Electoral Commission, who have to authorise all candidates, have rejected her application, citing numerous violations in the forms. Now, if this was anywhere else in the world, you'd simply put that down as an admin error. You'd tell off whoever filled the forms in, and then you'd resubmit and carry on as normal. However, as this is Russia, it's not quite as straightforward as that. And Duntsova has said that she's now struggling to find a lawyer who will authorise all of the papers because nobody wants to be seen to be supporting anybody in opposition to President Putin. And to be completely honest about the situation, you would either have to be very brave or crazy to stand in this election. And Duntsova herself admitted this recently in an interview when she said any sane person taking this step would be afraid, but fear must not win. Now, Russia has never had a female leader, so barring the only female candidate could be construed as being sexist. However, President Putin definitely isn't sexist, because when it comes to banning candidates, he's happy to ban anybody, whether they're male or female. And one of his main contenders over the last 10 years, Alexei Navalny, has been banned on multiple occasions. Alexei Navalny has been outspoken against the Russian authorities for a long period of time. He says that it's corrupt and fraud and wants to have a free democracy. And in 2013, he put himself forward to run for the position of the mayor of Moscow. And immediately upon doing that, he was arrested, charged with fraud, and given a 5-year prison sentence. He subsequently withdrew his application to be the mayor of Moscow and was released on bail. In 2016, he announced that he wanted to run against President Putin in the 2018 presidential election, and upon that news, he was immediately rearrested and told that he was no longer eligible to run for presidency because he was under arrest. In 2017, he was attacked in what's known as a Zelionka attack, which is an attack which involves spraying the victims in the face with a green chemical, which is very difficult to remove and means that your face stays green for a number of weeks and also can lead to the loss of vision. Following the Zelionka attack, he was subsequently arrested in 2017 and placed in jail. Upon his release, he was then arrested in 2018 and placed in jail again. He was subsequently released, and in 2020 he was poisoned on a plane with Novichok and nearly died, and then in 2021 he was arrested again and has been in prison ever since. And the reason that I thought it was worth mentioning all of that is that the presidential election is coming up in March of 2024. all of the candidates are now sitting having their Christmas lunch, thinking about whether or not they really want to win that election, and I would bet there are not many people who are rooting for anybody apart from President Putin. So we don't know what the outcome of the election is obviously yet, but I think it's extremely likely that President Putin will be re-elected in March of 2024. That will take him through to 2030 in terms of his next period of office, and it's likely that the war in Ukraine will continue whilst President Putin remains in power. Nicolas Maduro has been the president of Venezuela since 2013 and is one of the reasons why Venezuela has faced a series of sanctions over the last 10 years, because there were allegations of corruption at the time of his election. Now, Venezuela is also due to have an election during 2024, and interestingly, the main candidate against Nicolas Maduro is a female called Maria Machado. And in a similar fashion to what's happened recently in Russia, Maria Machado has also been barred from standing for election as a result of the fact that she has previously been supportive of the sanctions applied against Venezuela by the USA. Now, interestingly, up until this week, Maria Machado had been completely ignoring the ban and saying that she was going to run for election anyway. But apparently she has now done a U-turn on that situation and submitted an official appeal against the ban in order to enable her to run for the presidency. So we'll have to keep an eye on how that appeal goes and whether or not she's allowed to stand against the president in the forthcoming election. But the big news coming out of Venezuela this week is that the old dispute between Guyana and Venezuela about the Essequibo territory, which is an area of around 61,000 square miles and makes up around 2/3 of Guyana, is now back on, and Venezuela are saying that all of this land belongs to Venezuela. Now, interestingly, the majority of this terrain is hills and jungle, but it is rich in resources. It's reported to have gold, diamonds, and off the coast of this area are large quantities of oil. So this is a very valuable territory. Now, interestingly, Guyana used to be part of the British Empire. In the past, it was called British Guyana, but it got its independence back in 1966. And Venezuela are blaming the British, saying that this has always been part of Venezuela, and it was really down to the Brits when they arrived that they redrew the map of the area and stole this territory. And also, interestingly about Guyana, it's the only English-speaking country in South America as a result of formerly being part of the British Empire. Now, in response to the latest spat that's arisen between Venezuela and Guyana, the UK government has sent one of its warships to the region to do some patrols. And it'll be really interesting to see whether or not a conflict does erupt. At the moment, Venezuela are saying that they want to do this diplomatically, that they want to negotiate some form of settlement where they can take control of 2/3 of Guyana. I can't believe that the president of Guyana will agree to that. So we do have a situation again in the world where we've got disputed territory. Most of the wars that we're seeing tend to be over disputed territory. One side says we have a right to it, the other side says the opposite, and sometimes we get war. And it'll be fascinating to see if a war does erupt, what the United Kingdom does, because even though Guyana isn't part of the British Empire anymore, in fact the British Empire doesn't exist, it's an outdated concept, it's still got a long relationship with the country, and if Venezuela does invade, the United Kingdom does have the potential to be drawn into that conflict. And the last forthcoming election that I wanted to talk about today is in El Salvador. On February the 4th, they've got a new election for the president. And interestingly, Nayib Bukele, who we've talked about a lot on the channel and is doing great things in his war on gangs, officially wasn't allowed to run for re-election because the constitution in El Salvador says that you can't have the president in consecutive terms. However, that's been now overturned because he's so popular and everybody loves what he's doing. They want him to stay in power. And so they've changed the rules to allow him to go for a consecutive term. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not he's voted in. I think there's a high likelihood that he will be because, as I said, I think he's doing really good things over in El Salvador. But interestingly, this week, El Salvador has announced some more news about Bitcoin. Back in September 2021, Nayib Bukele announced that Bitcoin was being accepted as legal tender in El Salvador. And the official currency of El Salvador, let's not forget, is the US dollar, because they scrapped their own currency back in 2000 and decided to go all in on the greenback. And they've now announced that they're opening up citizenship to anybody that donates Bitcoin to the El Salvador government. Now, El Salvador is in a cash-strapped position. They're currently in negotiations with the IMF for a new deal, so they do need money. So what they've said is that if anybody would like El Salvador citizenship, all they need to do is donate Bitcoin in order to get that. And usually there's a 5-year process that you have to go through if you want to do this. Now, there's no specification in terms of how much Bitcoin you have to donate. But if it's just one Bitcoin, that would equate to around $43,000 at the current rate. So if you fancy moving to El Salvador, if you think what Nayib Bukele is doing is exciting and you want to be part of it, they recently hosted the Miss Universe contest. Not sure that that's going to influence your decision or not, but I just wanted to mention it in case it does. So if you want to move to El Salvador, all you need to do is find yourself $43,000, buy one Bitcoin, donate it to the El Salvador government, and Bob's your uncle, you're off and running. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed today's Cup of Joe. You've managed to have a drink along with me. I'll have another sip. I've enjoyed it. So if you have thought it was good, then please give me a thumbs up and drop me a comment in the section below, and I will see you again soon. And don't forget, have a great Christmas.